Okay, give me your name, a little bit of background, and then we'll go to the sighting.
Well, my name is Brian Sim. My educational background is I'm an aircraft manufacturing engineering technologist. I'm 47 years old.
Okay. Before today, I had called you. Before today, had you and I ever discussed the sightings that we're about to discuss?
No.
And what is the significance of your sightings?
Well, the significance of my sightings is it's actually the sighting that's made me believe in aircraft possibly not constructed of this earth. It was a very fantastic sighting. It was the closest, like I have seen other things, but this is the closest sighting that I've ever had.
Okay, and who was there with you?
It was yourself.
I was there.
And there was also my brother Glenn and Ken McKenzie.
Ken McKenzie. Okay, so I've never discussed with you, and the people who are now watching this tape have heard my version of the story. Mm-hmm. So I brought you in, and I haven't really heard your version of the story. So can you tell me a couple of the most dramatic, start with the most dramatic sighting in the experiences back in Carman, Manitoba, Canada, and then we'll get to some of the more minor ones, but tell me the highlight sighting that I've already told to the audience that's now watching this.
Well, yeah, of course that was the most amazing sighting. We had pulled off of the main road into a farmer's field, and then we had observed observed these lights that were coming towards us. We had gotten out of the car, and I remember watching this thing coming towards us. It was actually coming dead slow. But the thing to me that caught my attention the most was the fact that there was absolutely no sound whatsoever. This thing continued to approach. I noticed that there was three lights. They were a good size. They didn't appear to be what I'm used to of seeing lights, like coming through some sort of a colored filter. They were good size. They were kind of giving off a bluish greenish light, but it was kind of as if it was changing. It didn't kind of keep as in one solid color. Now this craft, I'm calling it a craft because I can't explain what else it is. It came and it paused. It stopped. Just kept a certain distance from us. I'm guessing about it was about 50 feet in the air, maybe between 50 to 75 feet away. Now the reason that I can tell this thing was really close is the fact that off of these lights you could get this kind of a reflection onto what I would consider the skin of the craft. It was kind of a metallic in look. It didn't have a lot of reflective properties, but it looked metallic. The size of the sheen that came off of the surface was probably about 1.5 to 1 to 1.5 size the diameter of the actual light itself. Now the thing to me that was really caught me was the fact that once it was at that distance, the thing then paused, and then it continued just at a very dead slow speed, and it appeared to be keeping an equal distance the whole time away from us. It never got any closer, never got any farther, and it continued to in like an arc-like motion. Pretty well did a semicircle around us, and then once it again lined up, because it was looking like it was coming straight over us. Once it was in behind us, then it continued to go away from us, and it kept the same speed. And as I said, absolutely no sound. The thing that I really couldn't figure out about it was the size of it. That night it was pitch dark, there was no moon. Must have been a thin cloud cover or something, because couldn't really make out stars. So except for seeing those lights in the sky and the reflection of the lights, I couldn't really get a feel for what the actual size of the craft was.
Okay, excellent. Do you recall this small object that we were watching before it came? Like these ground lights or monitors, or can you maybe describe some of those sightings, as I've described those before, mm-hmm. and I know you were involved in some of those sightings.
Yeah, we were out a number of times. Our most common sightings, we had tried to pursue them down the road. The illumination always seemed to be the same, possibly meaning it's keeping the same distance from us. We would then stop, turn around, go the other direction, and again, the illumination of that light that we had saw, as we call it, the light at the end of the road, it wouldn't change. Now, one of the more spectacular sightings that I recall was one of the times, again, we were parked in the field, seeing, you know, all the roads there are kind of 1 mile grids. I'm guessing we were probably 1 mile away from that happening. And it appeared that they were over top of the telephone hydro lines, and then there were two objects. They were actually quite some distance apart, and then we were watching them, and it started to look as if, you know, they were starting to come together. And then the most brilliant thing was when actually they did come together. Now, and then all of a sudden you got this really big orange glow. Once they actually, whether they were beside each other or came together, I don't know. But as soon as they came together, it was fused into one large glow.
Any noise associated with that sort of explosion of light?
Not that I recall. I don't really recall,
Okay.
you know, any sound associated with that.
And we were about a mile away, and then what did we do after that? Do you remember?
To be honest, I don't. You know, I just
Okay.
all of these sightings I do recall.
Of course, you were fairly young at the time when this
Yeah, I
was
was
going on.
between 14 and 15 at the time.
Okay.
And of course, I remember the spectacular events, but to be honest,
Yeah.
I don't remember all,
Well, there
all
were
the details.
How many sightings would you have been involved with? There was this object, as some people would know, was there fairly regularly.
Yes, and
So you were
that was
involved in-
one object that we did kind of see on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You know, it was pretty well, if we went out there and didn't see any major observations of what we would consider possibly larger craft, then we would at least count on seeing these. And in my mind, I consider them something like probes that were monitoring whatever they were monitoring, but they were around.
About how many times do you figure you were out in around the Carman area?
I can recall, I believe it was at least four times that I went out.
Do you recall the one of the first time you went out, where the ping pong ball, we refer to as a ping pong ball? Can you describe that sighting?
Yeah, actually, that was the first night that you took me out there, and you know, I recall you know, the information and what you had said going on, that this thing tended to show up around 1-ish.
Yeah.
You know, it just seemed to have a timetable, and sure enough, that first night that we went out there, we ended up parked, and there were other people that were out trying to observe this phenomenon as well. And sure enough, there it was, and it seemed to be quite a distance away. But the thing that struck me about it, you know, having observed aircraft at night, and of course, you know, you can follow it. You know, of course, their strobes are on, and you can see them flying, but you can predict where the next, you know, if you see the strobe off, you can kind of predict where the next strobe is going to be. This strobe effect, actually, it was all over the sky, you know, and the time lapse between when it would show up in one position to another, you know, sure, you could say maybe a helicopter, but you know, because it can move in those type of directions versus an aircraft. But this thing was all over the map, and sometimes the distances compared to one flash to another, it just didn't lend itself very well to any craft that I'm familiar with.
Okay. Do you remember it getting close to us? Do you remember that part of the sighting?
That first night that I saw that was kind of all that we saw. I don't believe that I was there where it actually came close to us.
Any other sightings you can recall that sort of stand out in your mind?
No, it was actually that close encounter that we had. That was, of course, the one that stands out in my mind the most, and I'll never forget.
There was one, I don't know if you recall, we walked across a field. Do you remember? We trudged through the mud in a field, and we were standing under the telephone lines or hydro lines, and we could hear it. We couldn't see it, and then we spotted it very close to us. Do you remember? Were you on that?
No, I don't believe I was with you on that.
Okay. So, in your life, you've had these experiences. This was 1975, 1976. So, can you describe for me an incident later? Now, this doesn't involve. This is you go to Europe. You come back from Europe for a visit, and can you describe that sighting that you described to me?
Yeah, I guess my second most spectacular sighting. But this one, I was by myself. Well, when I saw the sighting, I was by myself, but I was with a couple of friends at a cottage. We were at just outside of Pointe du Bois, and I enjoy, you know, looking up at the night sky in the evening. So, you know, they had gone into the cabin. I went down on the rock there and was, you know, observing the night sky. And this sighting to me was also incredible, but it was something that was just on the opposite end of the spectrum. In my perception, this was like far, far away. I saw two objects that were, in my opinion, were outside of the atmosphere. It looked like they looked, you know, long way away. They looked very large. There were 12 lights in a circle. They both looked the same, except for one of them. To me, it was closer than the other because it looked larger and the lights were a little brighter. But again, far, far away. These objects were not going very fast. They were kind of just way up, you know, like I said, out of the atmosphere. They came up, and then the furthest object, you know, in my interpretation, it actually went from having potentially disc side facing me to going onto its edge. And then all of a sudden there was all kinds of different lights, almost all the lights in the spectrum. You know, and it was almost like heat waves or something. There was kind of like a wavy motion, and it was all blending together. And then as soon as that happened, this thing, it started to get smaller and smaller, like very quickly, to the point that the thing just disappeared. And then shortly after that was gone, then the second object did exactly the same procedure and was just disappeared instantly. Now again, I can't explain what that is, but that was something that you know, didn't resemble any you know, spacecraft that I know of that we have developed. It sure wasn't a shuttlecraft. It was not a rocket. So I don't know what that was, but it was, you know, I'd say my next most incredible sighting of what I would call an unidentified flying object, because I have no way of knowing what it was.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else we should discuss? I'm trying to think. I guess that's it.
Henry and Hattie Miller. Henry worked as the elevator